Today I want to talk to you about whether you may or may not need insurance for your business, even if you have an LLC. Ready? Let's do this. Hey, if you're new to the channel, my name is Jim Hart. I am a trademark and business lawyer in North Carolina, but I practice remotely in Portugal, which is why I've got this big old world map behind me, because we're going to be using that to help educate our kids in the next year as we're traveling around Europe. But today what I want to talk to you about is business insurance. And it's really important that we have this discussion because this is something I've never really talked to anybody about on my channel. And I talk to a lot of people about their LLCs, and I think that business insurance is one of those things that really needs to go hand in hand with your LLC. Whether you have just started your business or you've been in business for a long time, chances are you want to make sure all of your assets are protected. And we're talking about not only your personal assets, which is what an LLC will typically do, but also your business assets as well. And if you're still watching this video, it's very possible that you're not sure whether or not business insurance is the right thing for your business. Maybe you've got it and you're not sure that you need it, or maybe you don't have it and you're thinking maybe you should get it. Hopefully I can answer those questions for you in today's video. Why is this important at all, Jim? Like, why do I need to worry about business insurance? Well, if you want to make sure you don't lose your house or your car or your investment properties or your business, then you probably want to have a discussion about business insurance, and you probably want to listen to what I have to say today. Because the last thing you want to do is go through a really expensive lawsuit where not only do you have to spend a lot of money on lawyers to help defend yourself, but then at the end of the day, maybe you get a judgment against you because you can't pay the damages that you would need to pay a plaintiff that might sue you or your business. So that's kind of something to think about, and I think that's pretty, don't you think that's pretty important? Yeah, I think that's pretty important too. So let's talk about that. So the first question that will frequently come up when I'm talking to clients, specifically clients that are forming their LLC with me about the insurance issue is, well, why do I even need insurance if I have the LLC? Isn't that the whole point of the LLC? The LLC provides liability protection, so why do I need that insurance? And we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about the different types of insurance that you might need for your business. In terms of the type of insurance that you might want for your business, you could get a general liability policy or an umbrella policy. You could get a products liability policy. You could get a malpractice policy if you're providing some sort of professional services. You might need workers' compensation insurance, which is mandated in some states depending on the number of employees that you have working for you, or maybe just a general cyber insurance policy to protect from cyber stuff that happens. I'm not even really sure how that works, but that's another possibility. For purposes of today's video, we're really going to be talking about the more general liability policy. Now, this applies to all those other types of insurance that I just talked about, but I think it's easier to understand when we're talking about it in terms of a general business context. What does business insurance, or what does insurance just in general do? Well, it protects against a risk of loss. And insurance started way back hundreds of years ago when people started to take boats and sail across the oceans to get goods and products and treasure and things like that from other places and bring them back. And there was a risk that those boats might sink at some point during that process. And so what happened is people pooled together a bunch of money and basically paid into a central fund where if the boat that they owned sank, they would recoup money from that fund or the business. I'm not sure exactly how they set it up back then, but that's the general idea of insurance. So insurance protects you against the risk of loss that could happen for, in this case, your business. And if you think about it, if you've got a car insurance policy, you're protecting against the possibility that you are in an accident. For example, when we first got to Portugal and I didn't know how to drive in Portugal, I got a small little fender bender, and rather than pay out the almost 3,000 euros it cost to repair my car, as well as God knows how much it cost to repair the other person's car, I paid a small little deductible. It was like 100 or 200 euros, and that's all I had to pay, and I was off the hook for everything else. In terms of homeowner's policy, if your house burns down or a tree falls on your house, or you need to have your roof replaced because a storm blew it off and you've got a wind damage policy for your house, then you would pay a small deductible or maybe a large deductible, and the insurance company would take care of all that. In the case of health insurance, if you get cancer or get get sick or you have to go to the doctor, rather than pay for the fees and the tests and all those type of things, you're going to have to pay for, actually, you know what? I'm just gonna not do health insurance on this video because I mean, you know why I'm not doing health insurance on this video. And so in the case of business insurance, you might be wondering, well, what does business insurance do? Well, business insurance protects you in the event that one of your customers or clients is injured by the negligence of either you or potentially one of your employees, or maybe one of the vendors that works for you. And so that's what business insurance does. And let's take an example. So a good example of this, back in the day, years and years and years ago, when I practiced law in Florida, I was a plaintiff's lawyer. And what does that mean? That means that I represented people that were injured. And I didn't do very much of this, and I didn't do it for very long, but I did have a couple of cases. And one of the cases I had was a woman who was injured while she was visiting a resort in Orlando, and she got injured, and she ended up, I think she broke her leg in multiple places, and she had to have surgery, and she was in a body cast, and she was an elderly woman, so you can imagine she had a number of injuries, and her bills were substantial. And we ended up settling that case because we went after the resort, who then ultimately, their insurance company paid the claim for my client. And that is an example of how business insurance works. So if you were the owner of that resort or the store where she was shopping, where she got injured, it wasn't a slip and fall case, it was a trip and fall case. They had a section where the floor didn't meet up. There was tile here and wood here, and there was a gap, a pretty large gap that was not covered by anything, and there was no warning sign, and she tripped over that and fell, and that's how all this happened. But if you were the store that operated that store, and for some reason you had never fixed that, and you knew about it, it was open and obvious, but you didn't fix it, then potentially you could be on the hook if she was injured, but your insurance would pay for that. That's the way insurance works. If you have business insurance, it's going to pay not only the claim itself, but it's also going to pay to hire a lawyer for you. It's going to pay for any expenses related to defending you in that claim. And so it's got a pretty broad protection, and they're going to have exclusions in every policy, and there's going to be things that it will cover and things that it won't cover. So you need to make sure that you're getting the right type of insurance for your situation, but that's the general idea of what business insurance will do for you. So this past weekend, our kids were on spring break, and so we took a short little mini trip, if you want to call it, to London. I just saw on Instagram, somebody said that the difference between a trip and a vacation is a trip is where you have your kids. A vacation is where the kids stay at home or you don't have kids. And I think that's probably true. So we went on a short little mini trip over the past week to London to continue our tour of Europe while we're living here in Portugal. And I got this wonderful little Union Jack mug that I'm loving for my coffee break. Pretty easy to see, but still Portuguese coffee inside. Yep. Still Portuguese coffee. Let's transition from what business insurance will do for you to what an LLC will do for you. And an LLC is different. What an LLC does is it separates liability. In other words, and this is just one of the benefits. There's other benefits of having an LLC, which we're not going to talk about in today's video, but for purposes of what you need to know with business insurance, an LLC separates liability of your business or the LLC from your personal liability. So if the LLC does something and they incur a liability, the LLC is responsible for paying out that claim, and you personally are not responsible for paying out that claim. That's how an LLC works. That's what an LLC does. What happens then if you have an LLC on the one hand, but you do not have business insurance on the other hand? Well, in this situation, then the LLC is responsible for everything. So let's take that example again of my client who tripped and fell and was injured in the store or at that resort in Orlando. In this situation, if that store did not have insurance, but they just had the LLC, then what we could have done is we would have gone after the owner of the LLC and said, hey, we need your LLC to pay my client's medical bills and damages related to her fall. And then if the damages exceeded the amount that the LLC could pay, then you start talking about potentially suing the owner of the LLC personally and trying to quote unquote pierce the corporate veil. So that's where the LLC really comes into play. And this is why it's so important to manage your LLC properly to keep people from being able to pierce the corporate veil. But that's the kind of the situation. So even if they're not able to pierce the corporate veil, you still have a situation where the LLC could potentially be paying out hundreds of thousands of dollars, as was the case for my client way back when in Florida. And if the LLC did not have the money to pay that, not only would the LLC go bankrupt, but then there runs the risk that the owner of the LLC might personally have to pay out that claim as well. So you can see where the LLC helps to separate that liability, but it doesn't necessarily, if you don't have the money to pay for things with your LLC, then you still could get into trouble where the plaintiff's attorney could come after you personally as the owner of the LLC and attempt to pierce that corporate veil. On the other hand, let's say that you have your LLC and you do have business insurance over here. Well, in this case, what would happen is, and this is what did happen, is you would call up your insurance company and say, hey, we've got a customer that tripped and fell in our store and they were injured and I'm not sure what to do about that, so I want to just go ahead and give this to you to file a claim. And what'll happen then is the customer or their lawyer would then correspond directly with the insurance company and or with the insurance company's lawyer, who they will hire to represent the interests of the insurance company, but really what they're doing is they're defending your store also. And then they would negotiate the settlement. They would negotiate the claim, and if a lawsuit got filed, then the lawyer for the insurance company would step in and defend that claim against any personal liability on your part. So assuming that your policy limits are high enough, and generally for a general liability policy, $1 million policy is pretty common. You can get that for a couple $100 a year, and you basically would be covered up to $1 million. And so in that situation, number one, you don't have to worry about the LLC paying out any part of that claim, other than maybe if you have a small deductible or the premiums that you're paying for the insurance policy. That's all you would have to pay. And if the claim went up to $1 million, you also would not need to worry about any piercing of the corporate veil. So from this perspective, I'm hoping that you can see quite readily the apparent benefits of having business insurance. Now, there are a couple things I think that you need to know before you just jump off and say, oh great, I'm gonna go buy some business insurance. And that is things that business insurance does not cover. Now, if you have intentional fraud, business insurance isn't going to cover that. If you have pre-existing claims, business insurance is probably not going to cover that. Unlike health insurance that maybe has to cover pre-existing conditions, business insurance is not the same. So I shouldn't say it probably isn't going to cover that. It's generally speaking not going to cover any pre-existing claims. And also it's not going to cover intentional acts. So if you have an employee that punches a customer or, gets angry and, hits somebody with one of your corporate trucks, within an instant of road rage, that's not going to be covered under your policy, because typically intentional torts are not covered by insurance. But everything else, any unforeseeable risk that might come along would be covered, and provided it's within the policy, the parameters of the insurance policy that you purchase. So you might be wondering, well, who do I use for business insurance? And my recommendation typically is you're going to go to somebody local. You can go to BNI Group and find a business broker. That's who I've used in the past. Alternatively, I have a link to a resource that I just learned about. It's called MBroker, and I am looking into using this service for some of my business insurance needs. And you can use the link down in the description below to learn more about that and get covered. Make sure you have a general liability policy in place, cyber insurance, all those things to make sure your business is protected. If you'd like to learn more about setting up your LLC and what that involves and whether or not that's the right decision for you, I've got another video you can check out right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.